Grüß, willkommen in einem Fragens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 24 of my organisational series of videos. In this video I'll cover the divisions and brigades of the Polish Army in 1939. This video structure will be different from my previous two videos, as the Polish Army was only in the field for a short time during World War II and there was very little changes in the divisions and brigades during that period. The greatest changes occurred with the mechanised cavalry brigades, which I will cover. As normal, before I proceed, a quick caveat. The analysis of the TINE has been focused on creating army lists for micro-army sets of rules. As a result, it may not meet the robust standards of an in-depth historical analysis. So if your expectation is an in-depth, never disclosed, historically focused analysis of the structure of the divisions and brigades, this may not be what you need. This will be probably a little bit more higher level. A quick note about my sources. In some cases I've obtained high quality official structural information, in other cases unreliable TONE diagrams. The bulk of my information comes from the excellent Niehorster documents. In my case I use the source from Carl and the www.niehorster.org site. My other sources are too numerous to list, but they range from wargaming TONE books to wiki. Just a quick final point, I do not normally include transport supply signals and other administrative formations. My main focus is combat troops, although in an emergency non-combat troops often found themselves in combat. In this video I'm not going to go into the detail of the actual Polish order of the battle for this campaign, that is the September 1939 campaign, as my primary focus is the structure of the various formations within the Polish Army. There are many good sources which provide this type of information, that is order of battle, such as even Wiki, which is surprisingly not really that bad in this particular case. While I tend not to like Wiki as a source of actual historical information, the Wiki entry for the Polish Army order of battle in 1939 does contain some rather good maps. In this case, the deployment of the Polish forces. Let's now drill down into the TONE. We will start with the infantry division, which was the bedrock of the Polish Army. The Polish Army consisted of 30 such infantry divisions. This diagram shows a Polish infantry division at full strength. When the Germans invaded in 1939, many infantry divisions were not up to full strength and were still mobilising. The division followed a typical 3 infantry regiment, 1 artillery regiment structure. The supporting formations consisted of a reconnaissance battalion and an anti-tank battery. The Polish were reasonably well equipped with anti-tank weapons, and the 75mm gun also proved very effective against tanks, although they could not ambush the German army in the same manner as a low-profile anti-tank gun. The Germans had not refined their doctrine, and tanks often went into action unsupported, allowing the Polish to inflict significant casualties against them. Let's drill down into the infantry regiment. The infantry regiment had 9 37mm anti-tank guns, which was an impressive amount of anti-tank capability. The regiment also contained 2 75mm guns, which could provide direct or indirect fire. I'd guess they were mostly used in the direct role. The regiment contained 2 81mm mortars, which is not really that impressive. I expect the 75mm guns would supplement this, but indirect fire capability was definitely a weakness. However, to compensate for this lack of medium mortars, each regiment contained a total of 27 45mm light mortars. While the shell was small and certainly did not have a major impact, it was nonetheless very useful in compensating for a weakness in indirect fire capability. I cannot be certain of the company size, but 140 men per company was the only information that I could extract from the sources I was looking at. This made for a reasonably small company, especially for 1939. The rifle company was rather basic, as can be seen by this diagram. One issue I had was to determine the strength of the rifle company. The only rather unreliable sources I could find indicated it was 140 men. However, I have no real idea if this is truly accurate because the number seems unusually low. The heavy weapons company was equally basic, and once again I had significant issues in obtaining the manpower of this formation. I suspect the top line number of 43 men, which I calculated based on the weapon systems in the formation, is almost certainly far too low. It's likely closer to a typical infantry company size, getting up to about 140 men, but 43 men is the only number I could confirm. Let's drill down into the artillery regiment. While there was some variation, each division contained 12 light howitzers, normally 100mm, along with 24 75mm guns. The 75mm gun was a useful dual-purpose weapon in the early war period, and as the Polish rarely conducted offensive operations, the light shells were not really a major issue. The weapons were all World War I vintage, but were nonetheless serviceable weapons. I suspect counter-battery fire was not possible with these weapons, so those more complex tasks would be carried out by corps-level artillery. Supporting the division was a cavalry reconnaissance battalion and an anti-tank battery armed with 37mm anti-tank guns. I'm uncertain how many divisions contained these anti-tank formations, but I suspect a reasonable number did, because the Germans did actually suffer unusually high tank losses. The second most important component in the Polish army was its cavalry brigades. These were the elite formations of the Polish army, and while they did not intend to charge into contact with the enemy, they were an effective mobile infantry formation nonetheless. The cavalry brigade came in two flavours, the 4-regiment and 3-regiment versions. The structure consisted of 3 or 4 cavalry regiments, a motorised infantry battalion and a cavalry artillery battalion. Supporting troops included a tankette company as well as an anti-tank, anti-aircraft and cycle company. The tankette company was often removed from this formation and placed under corps or army command. The cavalry regiment contained 37mm anti-tank guns as well as 45mm light mortars. It was an effective mounted light infantry regiment and would normally dismount to fight, although it was weak in indirect fire weapons. In a defensive position, it would be rather effective, and this was its main role in the 1939 invasion of Poland. The cavalry brigade also contained a motorised infantry battalion, which contained some 81mm mortars. I'd expect this would represent the pointy end of the brigade and capable of some offensive operation with its minimal indirect fire capability. Supported by tankettes, it could prove a useful mobile attack force. The artillery brigade consisted of 12 75mm guns, which for a brigade may have been reasonable, but it really limited its offensive ability. The motorised infantry company was basically an infantry company in truck, which is the standard formation of most of the combatants in 1939. The motorised heavy weapons company was also basically a standard heavy weapons company mounted in trucks, but the battalion did possess more support formations which would have been distributed to the rifle company in the same manner as the assets of the heavy weapon company. The light armoured company is very interesting, although to the best of my knowledge most were pulled from the cavalry brigades and concentrated at army or army group or corps level. If present in the cavalry brigade and combined with a motorised infantry battalion, this could have provided a powerful offensive force. The inclusion of 40mm anti-aircraft guns is also rather interesting. I'm uncertain how many brigades were equipped with these guns, but I suspect they would have been rather useful when attacked by German aircraft, which was a constant threat in September 1939. Let's now drill down into the mechanised brigades. The Polish Army had 2 mechanised brigades. The 10th Cavalry Brigade was the only fully operational motorised infantry unit during the entire invasion of Poland. That means that it was actually in place when the Germans attacked on the 3rd of September. There was also a Warsaw Armoured Motorised Brigade, but it had not yet fully formed by the 1st of September and was fully formed during the early weeks of the German invasion. In addition, the survivors of a tank battalion joined this brigade during the war, as well as additional attached formations. Actually, this occurred with both of the mechanised brigades. This lists the armoured formations of the Polish Army. While I consider this source as excellent, in my research the formations did change during the campaign, so that needs to be considered. An example was the 7 TP battalions. One battalion joined one of the mechanised brigades, but only after suffering heavy losses. For players who wish to recreate the Polish armoured forces, I suspect looking at their start forces with an understanding of the changes which did occur in the campaign is probably what you would need to consider. Incidentally, that chart comes from the excellent Blitzkrieg Armour and Camouflage and Marking 1939-40 by Stephen Zaloga. I highly recommend anyone interested in the topic to get a copy of this book. Now let's drill down into the mech brigades in more detail. The 10th Mechanised Brigade consisted of 2 motorised regiments, or really battalions, and a motorised artillery battalion. Under Brigade HQ there was a number of supporting companies, 3 tank companies, and an anti-tank and rather small anti-aircraft company. It proved to be well led and caused the Germans a great deal of trouble. A tank battalion joined it during the invasion, and with a tank battalion this represented a reasonable mechanised formation. However, it was grossly outnumbered and was unable to change the course of the war, obviously. The motorised regiment, or actually in reality it was battalion size, so I'm not quite sure why it had this rather unusual structure, but nonetheless it was a rather powerful motorised battalion. I suspect its cavalry roots is why it's called a regiment, but its size is a battalion. As with most infantry, it had 37mm anti-tank guns, 81mm mortars and 45mm light mortars. Looking at the support formation, starting with what's called a anti-tank battalion, the anti-tank battalion is actually a small mechanised anti-tank company. The artillery battalion, fully motorised, consisted of 4 75mm guns and 4 100mm howitzers. The most interesting part of the support companies is the light tank companies and a medium tank company. This represents a pseudo-tank battalion, which is combined with the 2 motorised battalions, would have made it a powerful combined armed formation. I'm uncertain if it ever fought in that manner, I suspect not, but with the correct doctrine this would have been a useful formation for counterattacks. The large number of anti-tank guns is unusual. I'm uncertain how real this was, but if it was, this gives it a very good defensive capability against German armour. The 2nd Mechanised Brigade was being formed in Warsaw when the Germans invaded. As a result, it was incomplete and was quickly put into action. During the latter stages of the war, the survivors of one of the tank regiments was added, as well as 2 independent artillery battalions. Other formations may have been added as well. This represents an estimation of what it may have looked like just before its destruction. The motorised regiment, again similar to the other brigade, really a battalion, was a bit of an unusual formation consisting of only a single motorised battalion and some surprisingly heavy support assets. I'm uncertain about the thinking behind this, but I expect this formation was designed to receive tankette companies to support it so it could form a small battle group. So perhaps the doctrine did allow for combined arms operation. The light tank battalion consisted of tankettes and armoured cars. Closer to a reconnaissance battalion than an actual tank battalion, nonetheless it did represent some form of armoured punch. A tankette armed with a machine gun could be very effective against pure infantry. However, once anything heavy appears, it would be in trouble. The interesting point here is in this particular brigade there was a battalion, tank battalion, while the original 10th Brigade did not organise their armour into a battalion formation structure. The attached tank battalion consisted of 7 TP light tanks and TKS tankettes. This was a more effective formation, especially considering it possessed actual tanks which could fire HE rounds and had reasonable armour protection. The one area the Polish were reasonably well equipped was in anti-tank guns. The 37mm anti-tank gun was effective against all German armour and inflicted significant losses on unsupported German armoured attacks. A quick note about the Bofors 37mm anti-tank gun. As far as I can work out, the Polish army had about 1,200 of these weapons, which I admit surprised me. As there were 30 infantry division, each which was supposed to have 27 anti-tank guns, we obtained a total of 810 guns only. The cavalry brigades required an additional 252 guns, leaving a significant number of guns for the mechanised brigades. Based on this, it looks like the Polish army had more than enough guns, anti-tank guns, to equip all their divisions and brigades with a full complement of anti-tank guns. In terms of artillery, this shows the only numeric data I could find on their numbers. The 100mm howitzers were all allocated to the infantry division, but the 105 and 120 were allocated at corps level. There was some heavier artillery, but I lack details on their numbers. The 105 WZ-29 was a very modern weapon and would have been towed using a half-track or other sufficiently modern or adequately modern towing vehicle. As I indicated at the beginning of the video, this video is mainly based on research which is designed to create army lists for micro-armor rules which use the platoon to company as its basic element or base. As a result, it's not focusing on the low-level structure of any formation, which would be the case if I designed the video for a skirmish or squad set of rules. As a result, I've attempted to provide accurate formation information at company level so players could field individual company elements or bases. As companies would often have other formations attached to them, this could be a little bit problematic. This comment is purely for the gamer, but if you wanted to game at this scale, the battalions or regiments can be historically accurate if you so desire. One of the options to make this happen was to make the battalion the accurate unit and simply divide the strength of the battalion into smaller parts, which don't actually represent a company but together represents the battalion. A lot of this depends on the rules being used, but if you go down this path, you achieve a battalion accuracy level. Let's look at an example. This shows an example from the Neue Punk rules, which is a figure game version of the SPI Modern Battles board game. Each element represents a battalion in this particular case. And so this concludes episode 24 of my video series on Pole organisation, in this case covering the Polish army in World War II. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.